Minsung meets with the apostle named Tiel and urges him to kill his guildmaster Lim Taegu as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Suho seeks help from his uncle Jinho to secure the rights to his first raid. Jinho agrees to assist and reminds Suho to be cautious. Suho decides to use this opportunity to level up quickly and to grow stronger. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the outside of the dungeon, where the other hunters feel something strange about Suho clearing the gate by himself. One of the hunter feels suspicious that Suho did not bring any mining or collection team and wonders how he is making money from the gate. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back inside the gate, where shadows are mining under Beru's supervision. Esil observes the process and comments that collection work requires a lot of expertise. Gray agrees with her, and Esil gets worried about how Suho is handling the C-rank boss. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Suho slashes the boss multiple times with his new dagger. The dungeon boss screams in pain, and Suho uses the Storm Slash skill to deliver a flurry of attacks. The attack activates the paralyze effect of Kasaka's Venom Fang, but the dungeon boss has high resistance to the effect. Suho feels disappointed that he could not fully test the new paralyzing effect. He wonders if the dagger has no effect on spiders and decides to fight the boss with his fists instead. He throws the dagger aside and lands a powerful punch on the dungeon boss. He follows up by controlling the dagger with ruler's authority to attack the boss from a distance. Suho feels confident that he has grown strong enough to defeat a C-rank boss and decides to challenge a B-rank gate next time. He notices that he has become more accustomed to fighting with ruler's authority. Suddenly an idea comes to him. He wonders what would happen if he combines his invisible hand with his physical attacks. Suho creates a new attack that merges his punch with ruler's authority and strikes the dungeon boss. The attack slams the boss to the ground, and Suho successfully defeats it. He levels up again, but the attack increases his fatigue to 83. Suho realizes that such attacks require a lot of concentration. Suho returns to meet the others, and Esil asks if he managed to defeat the dungeon boss. Suho happily confirms that he did, and Beru feels impressed that Suho is defeating enemies without him being on his side. Suho notices that Beru is eating and tells him to continue consuming the mana crystals while the group collects all the magic beast materials. Suho sells some of the items to the system store and receives gold in return. Beru mentions that Suho is now close to becoming a B-rank hunter, and Suho explains that it is not surprising since he has leveled up 8 more times. The others feel like they are growing stronger as Suho becomes stronger. Esil feels confused about how she is recovering her strength without consuming any blood. Suho suddenly notices that both Esil and Gray have levels. He sees this as a good sign that his allies are getting stronger, but feels puzzled about how the system works. Suho suggests checking if his allies can also level up, and Esil wonders how they can do that. Suho proposes going on more raids to test the theory. Both Gray and Esil feel completely shocked that the young monarch still wants to raid more gates after completing 2 raids already. Suho decides to first complete his daily quest to see if he can earn more rewards and heads to the Shadow Dungeon. Beru advises Suho not to get addicted to fighting, but they are suddenly shocked to find a red gate inside the Shadow Dungeon. Suho feels immense heat radiating from the gate and asks Beru if a gate can open inside the Shadow Dungeon. Beru feels uncertain about how this is possible. Suho receives an urgent quest to remove the cause of the dimensional break. He feels excited about the urgent quest and gives his allies heat-resistant robes to block the heat. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a field-type dungeon in Egypt, where Lu Xing from the Asura Guild feels furious about being asked to leave the dungeon, even though they arrived first. Randolph from the Scavenger Guild responds that he does not care who came first and declares that everything is meaningless in the face of overwhelming strength. Singh commands his guild members to prepare for battle, while the hunters from the Scavenger Guild also get ready to fight. Suddenly, Suho interrupts their fight and asks where he is. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the moment when Suho comes out of the gate and finds himself in a desert. Everyone feels stunned by the sudden change in environment. Beru senses a strong magic power coming from a pyramid in the distance, and they all start heading toward it. As they approach the pyramid, they notice a lot of machines scattered around. Suho feels confused about why there are machines, since they should not work in a dungeon. He begins to suspect that the place is not actually a dungeon. Suho decides to go back inside the Shadow Dungeon to check if the gate still exists. He returns after a moment, and Esil asks if the gate is still there. Suho sadly informs her that the gate has disappeared. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the outside of the gate, where the hunters are confused about why Suho has not come out yet. They notice the gate starting to disappear and decide to contact emergency services immediately. The scene then shifts back to the moment when Suho interrupts the battle between the Asura Guild and the Scavenger Guild. Suho feels grateful to see other people and notices that they are speaking in English. He asks in English where they are. Singh assumes that the Asian hunters are also after the dungeon, while Randolph feels irritated by the increasing number of competitors. Randolph recalls his conversation with Thomas, and Thomas informs informed him that about a being born of death who would break the seal and how he possessed the power to raise the dead. He mentioned that the pyramid field-type dungeon appeared right after the prophecy and ordered Randolph to secure the rights to the gate. Randolph asks how to deal with other guilds, and Thomas boldly tells him to use the Scavenger Guild's methods to take care of the issue. Randolph warns Suho to leave the dungeon alone. Suho quickly understands that the pyramid is the dungeon, but he has no choice but to clear it since it is part of his urgent quest. He asks what would happen if he refuses, and Randolph coldly explains that he would have to kill him. Randolph attacks Suho, but Suho swiftly dodges the strike. Suho counters with a punch, but decides to hold back since he is unsure of his current strength after leveling up. The punch does no damage, and Randolph feels disgusted that Suho is going easy on him. Randolph attacks again, but Suho dodges at the last second. Randolph gets frustrated and orders his men to kill everyone. Both Esil and Gray feel furious that their young monarch was attacked and charge at the Scavenger Guild members. The Asura Guild members realize that a fight is inevitable and prepare to join the battle. Beru feels worried about Suho and moves to check on him. Suho notices others fighting and understands that he must win his battle to clear the urgent quest. He charges at one of the Scavenger Guild members and kicks him in the face. However, the attack does little damage, and the hunter feels confused about how a weak hunter like Suho is challenging the Scavenger Guild. The hunter advises Suho to listen to the words of stronger beings. Suho feels frustrated that his attack was ineffective and decides to use his new attack by combining it with Ruler's authority. He hesitates for a moment and worries that the attack might kill the hunter. Suddenly, Singh from the Asura Guild kills the Scavenger Guild member with a single strike. Singh tells Suho not to hesitate during a fight and questions if he is afraid of killing someone. He explains that magic beasts are not the only threat to hunters and that Suho must have the resolve to protect himself against dangerous hunters. Suho recalls how he has avoided killing people in the past and realizes that there will be situations where he must resolve to kill in order to protect those he cares about. He begins to doubt if he can face Minsung with his current mindset. Singh suggests to form an alliance to fight against the Scavenger Guild. Suddenly, a Scavenger Guild member tries to kill Singh, but Suho charges forward and punches the attacker. The punch lands with devastating force and completely destroys the Scavenger Guild member. Suho decides not to hesitate anymore and resolves to fight with full determination. Randolph feels excited to see Suho defeat a B-rank tank-type hunter with a single hit. Suho introduces himself to Singh and agrees to form an alliance. The guild members begin fighting, and the Scavenger Guild feels confident that they can easily defeat their opponents. Suho decides to unleash his full power and brings out the Shadow Dungeon Key. He summons several giant arachne shadows, and Singh feels shocked to discover that Suho is actually a summoner. He gets confused how Suho was able to summon so many shadows at once. The shadows charge toward the Scavenger Guild, but Randolph steps forward and kills one of the shadows with a single strike. He charges at the rest of the shadows and finishes them off as well. Suho feels irritated by this, and Beru cannot believe that Randolph was able to defeat a magic beast that the young monarch had struggled to kill. Suho considers using Gray's bond skill, but Esil requests to use her bond skill instead and explains that she has figured out how to increase the charging rate. Suho feels hesitant to use a skill he has never used in combat before, and Gray becomes furious with Esil. Esil feels heartbroken that she is unable to be of any use to the young monarch. Suddenly, magic beasts begin swarming out of the pyramid, and Singh tries to stop them. Suho notices that magic beasts are also appearing at another entrance, and the Scavenger Guild's tank-type hunters block the beasts from advancing. Randolph suspects that the undead monsters might be connected to something Thomas had mentioned, and begins planning to take the power to raise the dead for himself. Suho continues fighting the undead, while Singh notices that the Scavenger Guild members are heading inside the pyramid. Randolph commands his troops to follow him into the dungeon, and Singh realizes that the Scavenger Guild is trying to block the entrance. Suho fears that he will not be able to complete the urgent quest at this rate. He uses the bond skill with Gray and instantly kills the undead magic beasts. Singh feels shocked by Suho's transformation and becomes confused about how Suho is able to merge with his own summons. Esil still feels sad that she was unable to use her bond skill with the young monarch. Meanwhile, the Scavenger Guild enters the pyramid, and Randolph begins to understand that Suho is far more talented than he initially thought. He decides to fight Suho once he obtains the power to control the dead. The guild members find a large door and discovers a magic beast beast chained down. They assume that the magic beast might be the dungeon boss. Suddenly, the magic beast speaks in beast language, but none of the guild members understand what it is saying. Out of nowhere, the magic beast breaks free from its chains. Randolph orders his men to prepare for battle, but the magic beast swings its chains and completely finishes off all the guild members. It breaks free from the remaining chains and slowly walks toward Randolph. Randolph feels disbelief as he watches the magic beast knock out his tanks with a single swing of its chains. The magic beast stops in front of him and surrenders, signaling for Randolph to attack it. Randolph feels disgusted that even the magic beast is looking down on him. He activates his giant armor skill to enhance his physical strength and attacks the magic beast with all his might. However, the magic beast does not budge at all. Randolph feels shocked that his attack had no effect and begins to regret his decision to enter the dungeon without Thomas. The magic beast strikes him with all its strength, sending Randolph crashing into a wall. The magic beast feels disappointed that the first living being it encountered broke after a single punch. It senses a few more living beings inside the dungeon and decides to continue its fun with the rest of them. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Suho as he continues fighting the endless wave of undead. He notices that the fight seems to have no end and decides to use shadow extraction on the undead magic beasts. However, the system informs him that the old souls cannot be extracted. Suho feels disappointed that the shadow extraction skill has more limitations than he expected. Beru feels sad that Suho still does not fully grasp the true potential of the skill. Suddenly, a massive centipede magic beast emerges from beneath the desert and attempts to devour the hunters. Esil leaps toward the centipede and attacks it with her weapon, but the attack does no damage. She realizes that the exoskeleton of the centipede is incredibly tough. Singh feels frustrated that the Scavenger Guild stole the rights to the field-type dungeon and advises Suho to retreat. Suho feels the same, but recalls the system's urgent quest to resolve the cause of the dimensional crack. He wonders if it is acceptable to abandon the quest, and suddenly the magic beast that killed the Scavenger Guild emerges from the pyramid. Singh feels shocked to see the magic beast, and the system notifies Suho that the beast is the prisoner of the tomb named Ammut. Suho senses that the red name above Ammut indicates a calamity-level threat. Ammut commands the undead to disappear, and the magic beasts begin retreating into the pyramid. Esil hears Ammut's command, and suddenly Ammut leaps toward her. Suho feels worried for Esil, but Ammut questions if she understood his words. Esil responds that she can understand him because she is a member of the demon race. Ammut feels happy to finally meet someone that he can communicate with, and Esil feels surprised that Ammut seems friendlier than she expected. Suddenly, the centipede magic beast tries to attack Esil, but Ammut swiftly kills it with a single strike. Esil feels shocked that Ammut defeated the centipede so easily, and Ammut decides to kill the remaining centipedes as well. He kills the second centipede with a simple kick, and Suho feels stunned to witness a magic beast killing another magic beast. Another centipede sneaks up behind Ammut and devours him, but Ammut breaks out of it and tears it into multiple pieces. Singh feels astonished to see Ammut killing countless centipedes in the blink of an eye. Ammut charges towards Singh, intending to kill him since he cannot communicate with him. Singh tries to block the attack, but Suho intervenes and strikes Ammut in the face to save him. Suho feels furious that a magic beast would kill others simply because it cannot communicate with them. Ammut realizes that Suho can also understand him and strikes Suho with a powerful punch that sends him crashing into a wall. Esil begins crying after seeing Suho suffer and decides to attack Ammut on her own. Ammut asks if Suho is her companion and promises not to kill her if she helps satisfy his curiosity. He questions her about the outcome of the battle between the Shadow Monarch and the other monarchs. Esil remains furious about what happened earlier and refuses to answer him. Beru tries to wake Suho, while Ammut warns that he will kill anyone who refuses to answer him. He attempts to stomp on Esil to kill her, but Suho regains consciousness just in time. Suho uses his status recovery to completely heal himself and confidently announces that all the monarchs were killed by the Shadow Monarch. Esil cries even more after seeing that the young monarch is fine. Ammut asks again if Suho is telling the truth, and Suho responds with certainty. He notices that Ammut is an S-rank magic beast and understands that provoking him would mean certain death. Ammut feels overjoyed to learn that the Monarch of Iron Body was defeated by the Shadow Monarch. Suho guesses that Ammut might be an Iron Body type magic beast and fears that he might try to kill him if he learns that he is the son of the Shadow Monarch. Suddenly, Ammut attempts to stomp on him, but Suho jumps back just in time to avoid the attack. He angrily demands to know why Ammut is trying to kill him. Ammut responds that he suspects Suho might be lying to him since his responses are slow and threatens to kill him if he does not answer his questions immediately. Suho feels frustrated that Ammut's reasons for killing others are so unreasonable. Ammut asks again if the Monarch of Iron Body truly died at the hands of the Shadow Monarch. Suho repeats his answer that the Shadow Monarch killed all the monarchs and worries that Ammut might go wild after hearing about the death of his monarch. However, Ammut laughs sinisterly and expresses his gratitude to the Shadow Monarch for killing the Monarch of Iron Body. Suho notices Ammut laughing and questions if he is not related to the Monarch of Iron Body. Ammut feels offended by the question and decides to kill Suho. He tries to punch him, but suddenly the chains on his hands pull him back. Ammut realizes that he has crossed the boundary of the domain assigned to him. The chains drag him back into the pyramid, and Ammut begins cursing Tarnak, the Monarch of Iron Body, and the spellcaster. Suho feels stunned by what he just witnessed, and Esil worries about her young monarch. Suho assures her that he is fine and decides to provide emergency medical support to Gray and the Asura guild members. Suddenly, the system updates the quest to free Ammut, the heir of the Iron Body, from the pyramid. Suho feels nervous and starts shaking nervously. They head inside the pyramid and find all the Scavenger guild hunters who were killed by Ammut. Suho eventually finds Ammut, and Ammut feels surprised that Suho came looking for him and admits that Suho has guts. Suho mentions that he wants to have a proper conversation with him. Ammut responds that they already had a good conversation earlier. Suho argues that it cannot be called a proper conversation if Ammut was trying to kill him. Ammut explains that he learned such behavior from Tarnak and suggests sending complaints to the Monarch of Iron Body. Suho begins to understand that Ammut does not like the Monarch of Iron Body. Ammut reveals that he despises Tarnak because he was created by the Monarch of Iron Body and a spellcaster before being abandoned in the pyramid. Suho wonders if Ammut can break the chains, and Ammut explains that the chains are made with magic, so even if he breaks them, they will reappear as soon as he leaves the domain assigned to him. He mentions that he will never forgive Tarnak and the spellcaster for tormenting him in this way. Suho feels puzzled about how to get rid of the chains when they keep reappearing and understands that simply pulling out the stakes will not solve the issue. Suddenly, an idea strikes him and asks Ammut if the magic beasts were already in the dungeon when he was sealed away. Ammut responds with a yes. Suho realizes that Ammut is not the dungeon boss and finds it strange that the spellcaster designed the chains to reappear whenever Ammut moves a set distance away. Suho makes an offer to free him from the place and asks Ammut to listen to his request in return. Ammut agrees to the offer, but questions whether Suho plans to kill the spellcaster without knowing his whereabouts, or if he has found a way to dispel the spell. He warns Suho that he will kill him if he is lying. Suho explains that he intends to make the dungeon collapse and guesses that Ammut cannot enter the depths of the dungeon because the spellcaster does not want him to kill the dungeon boss. He further adds that the chains will lose their purpose once the dungeon collapses and that Ammut will be free. Ammut finds the plan entertaining and agrees to go along with it. Suho and Esil prepare to fight the dungeon boss while Beru stays behind with Ammut. Beru starts panicking and worries that Suho is choosing Ammut over him. Ammut tells him to stop acting like a fruit fly, and Beru retorts by asking if Ammut wishes to die at the hands of his original body. Ammut finds it hard to believe that Suho is the son of the Shadow Monarch and remarks that the plan will fail if Suho does not kill the dungeon boss, or if the chains remain even after the dungeon collapses. Despite his doubts, Ammut feels conviction in Suho's voice when he promises to free him from the chains. He recalls how Tarnak always claimed that physical strength is true strength, and reflects on how even weaker beings can sometimes appear greater than themselves. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Suho as he continues fighting the magic beasts. Esil fights alongside him, and together they clear all the magic beasts except for the dungeon boss. The dungeon boss is revealed to be the tomb's warden Shika. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the time when Suho and Ammut discuss their plan to escape the dungeon. Suho opens a portal to the shadow dungeon and attempts to help Ammut escape through it. As expected, the chains appear and prevent Ammut from entering the shadow dungeon. Ammut explains that the chains activate whenever he even thinks about leaving the dungeon. Suho finds the spell troublesome and begins explaining the plan. First, Suho and Esil will kill the dungeon boss, which will cause the dungeon to collapse. Once the dungeon collapses, the chains will lose their purpose and everyone can escape into the shadow dungeon. Suho feels worried that the entire plan could fail if any part of it goes wrong and considers creating a backup plan. However, Ammut refuses the idea of a backup plan and declares that he would rather die than remain trapped in the dungeon. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the fight as Suho charges toward the dungeon boss. He attempts to slash the boss multiple times, but the sand surrounding the boss acts as a shield and blocks his attacks. Suho realizes that the dungeon boss is at least an A rank and begins to worry that he will run out of mana if the fight continues at this pace. Esil throws her weapon toward the boss, and Suho uses ruler's authority to guide the weapon in an attack. The dungeon boss deflects the weapon, and Suho urges Esil to use their bond skill. Esil agrees and begins charging her entire power into a small ball. The charging rate of the bond skill increases as she absorbs the souls of the defeated magic beasts. She sends her entire charge to Suho and collapses from exhaustion. Esil hopes that her bond skill will help Suho and feels regretful that she has only shown her weak side to the young monarch so so far. Suho receives 67% of the charge and decides to pour all the energy into a single attack. He delivers a powerful punch that kills the dungeon boss and causes the dungeon to collapse. Both Beru and Ammut realize that Suho has defeated the dungeon boss, and Ammut breaks free from the chains. Beru tells Ammut to follow him to meet the young monarch, and Ammut feels hopeful that he will finally be free from Tarnak. He recalls how Tarnak and the spellcaster performed experiments on him. Every day, Tarnak destroyed his body, and the spellcaster restored it. As the experiments continued, his body grew stronger according to their plan. However, his mind endured the pain, and he eventually gouged out his own eyes to transform himself and began to embrace the pain. During his suffering, the only thing that kept him going was his desire to once again experience the majesty of the great nature he had seen in his youth. Ammut tries to leave the dungeon, stakes begin flying toward him, and he starts roaring in frustration. He realizes that Tarnak would rather kill him than let him escape. Suddenly, Suho appears and kicks one of the stakes away. His leg becomes heavily injured from the impact, and he notices that the stakes are incredibly tough. The stakes come back to strike again, and Suho decides to deflect the stakes into the shadow dungeon. He kicks one stake into the portal and continues doing the same with the rest. Ammut watches in disbelief as Suho bleeds from his entire body with each strike. Suho's bones begin to crack under the strain, and Ammut steps in to punch one of the stakes into the shadow dungeon. After witnessing Suho's determination to free him, Ammut understands why all the monarchs lost to the shadow monarch. He offers to help Suho to move the remaining stakes and acknowledges him as the young monarch. Together, they prepare to deflect the stakes into the shadow dungeon. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Esil, and she asks Beru if the young monarch and Ammut have safely entered the shadow dungeon. Beru tells her to remain silent as both of them are resting. Esil feels overjoyed that the young monarch is safe. Suho is sleeping after enduring continuous battles. He successfully recruits the heir of the Iron Body and completes the quest. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Chairman Wu, and Chairman begins reflecting on the events surrounding Hunters and Gates. He notices that Hunters and Gates began appearing after Sung Jinu disappeared. Using his memories from the past timeline, he was able to quickly establish the Hunters Association. However, he senses that something new is happening since Stardust did not exist in the previous world. Chairman Wu suspects that Lee Minsung is behind the Stardust manufacturing and deduces that Lim Taegyu is not helping him since Lee only acts when Lim is on overseas trips. He recalls that Lee Minsung was never capable of such actions in the past timeline and suspects that someone is helping him from behind the scenes. Suddenly, he receives a call from Jinho, and Jinho reveals that his nephew has awakened as a hunter and believes that he is trapped inside a gate. Chairman Wu pauses for a moment and feels stunned as he realizes that his nephew is none other than the son of Sung Jinu. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Suho, and he comes out of the dungeon and informs to Asura Guild that the dungeon has been cleared. He requests a phone to make a call, and the Asura Guild members feel disbelief that the dungeon was actually cleared. They all head back to the airport, and Singh thanks Suho for helping the Asura Guild with the pyramid. He expresses his desire to stay in contact with Suho even after he returns to Korea. Suho thanks him for arranging a flight back to Korea and also for helping him contact his uncle. He recalls how his uncle panicked upon hearing that he went to Egypt to raid a gate. Suho decides to visit the Hunters Association once he reaches Korea, since his uncle has already reported the incident to the chairman. Singh still finds it strange that a magic beast that seemed to be another S rank allowed the dungeon to collapse. Suho struggles to explain and simply responds that he got lucky. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the time after Suho escaped the pyramid. Despite entering the shadow dungeon, they could not break the chains. Suho questions Ammut if he will keep his promise since the seal was not fully released. Ammut responds that he will honor his promise since Suho only promised to get him out of the tomb. He finds the shadow dungeon more comfortable as it allows him to move freely. Suho notices that Ammut's demeanor has changed significantly after being freed from the pyramid. Suddenly, Ammut grabs Suho and jumps to the top of a building. He feels the faint presence of the great nature he missed and agrees to follow Suho as his teammate. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a conversation between Suho and the Asura Guild. Suho prepares to leave, and Singh feels impressed by Suho's ability to summon magic beasts and even transform with his summons despite being a B-rank hunter. He considers recruiting Suho into his guild. Beru comments to Suho that it has been a while since he has been on a plane. Suho asks about his current rank after leveling up 7 times from completing the urgent quest. Beru informs him that he is now an A-rank hunter. Suho feels excited that he can finally launch a counterattack against both Lee Minsung and the Apostles. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Chivalry Guild office, where the hunters are overjoyed about acquiring the rights to a B-rank gate, despite most of their members being C-rank. One hunter feels grateful that Stardust is helping them clear higher-ranking gates. Another mentions that Stardust is becoming cheaper on the black market and expresses gratitude to the person manufacturing it. The only B B-rank hunter in the guild, Kim Sung-soo, voices his suspicion that something is wrong with Stardust. Another hunter dismisses his concerns and claims that Kim does not understand their struggles as a B-rank hunter. Kim reveals that the Hunters Association is working to pass a law to prohibit the use of Stardust. The other hunters feel frustrated and complain that their guild has never received support from the association. They wonder why the association is trying to ban Stardust when it has no apparent side effects. Suddenly, Tiel enters the office and commands the guild to hand over the rights to the latest B-rank gate they acquired. All the hunters fall under his control and agree to give up the rights. Kim feels confused as he watches his guild members stand and bow to the child. Tiel notices that a few hunters do not consume Stardust and orders his followers to block both their sight and hearing. Kim furiously demands to know why Tiel is doing this. Tiel boldly explains that his creator wishes to possess the rights to a world without a master. Kim becomes enraged and draws his sword. He accuses Tiel of being part of a cult religion and vows to stop him from doing as he pleases. Tiel brings out a dagger and becomes frustrated that a human would compare their belief to a cult. He uses the Amplify skill on his dagger and kills Kim with a single strike. Kim's blade shatters during the attack, and another hunter is also killed. Tiel grants his followers permission to see and hear again and commands them to clean up the office. They start heading out of the office, and a few hunters outside hear the loud noise from inside. Tiel controls them and orders them to forget everything they witness. He reflects on the concept of free will and concludes that creations are meant to follow the wishes of their creators. Tiel and his followers proceed to raid the B-rank gate and capture the dungeon boss. Tiel decides to call the magic beast a dimensional refugee that broke out of a dimensional crack. He offers the magic beast a stardust to unleash its anger on humans. He places the stardust on the beast's eye and resolves to investigate more about the human world to fulfill his creator's wishes. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to outside the gate, where Hunter Association members assess the situation and realize that a dungeon break will occur if the gate is not handled. One of them worries about the damage it could cause to the airport and decides to report the issue to the Hunters Association. Suddenly, Tiel appears and begins controlling his followers. One of the association members declares that he will report to the Hunters Association that there are no issues at the gate. Shortly after, the dungeon break occurs and magic beasts start emerging from the gate. Tiel believes that creations exist only to fulfill the wishes of their creator. He thinks that when a creator grows bored, the creations will fight among themselves to entertain them. He recalls how one day his creator informed him that a creator from another dimension had died and ordered him to claim the rights to the world that had lost its master. The apostles followed the words of their God and gathered countless believers. They prepared an army to invade the world without a master, but transporting such a massive force required an unimaginable amount of energy. The dimensional passage was too narrow to handle the energy needed to send the army, so the process took a long time. When the army of God finally reached the world without a master, they encountered a being surrounded by darkness. This being summoned a vast dark army to fight against the army of God. The army of darkness possessed incredible strength and began slaughtering the soldiers of God. Whenever a soldier fell in battle, the darkness consumed them and turned them into part of the dark army. The war continued and more soldiers died, and the power of the darkness grew beyond imagination. The army of God was forced to retreat, unable to overcome the overwhelming strength of the darkness. The despair starts spreading among the soldiers as they failed to advance for a long time. Tiel spoke to inspire hope in the army. He explained that the darkness could not return to its own world due to the immense magic power he possessed. He proposed using Mistborns, the lowest rank of believers who had been destroyed and burned by the fire of faith, but still carried out the will of God. Tiel explained that Mistborns were fatal to worlds without magic power and could help increase the number of believers in the world. The army agreed to Tiel's strategy. Tiel used his ability to split his strength into 5 fragments and carried the flame of the Mistborns through the weakest fragment to the world without a master. The plan succeeded as the weakest fragment went undetected by the darkness and successfully entered the world. However, the weakest fragment encountered an unexpected twist. The beings in the world who previously had no magic power had now gained it. Tiel learned about the great cataclysm that created magic power in the world and decided to wait for the arrival of the other fragments. After fusing with the second fragment, he began to suspect that someone was behind the great cataclysm. Meanwhile, the magic beasts attack the airport, and the passengers realize that a dungeon break has occurred and attempt to contact the Hunters Association. Tiel observed the chaos and hopes to witness how an S-rank hunter would fight, but only a few low-ranking hunters arrive to deal with the magic beasts. Tiel notices the hunters and realizes that they are users of Stardust. Whenever a hunter uses Stardust, a faint trace of faith accumulates in their body, and it usually has little effect. Tiel uses his Amplify ability and enhances their faith to take control of the hunters. He orders his followers to leave immediately. The chaos unfolds, and a goblin stabs a human. The woman pleads for his help. Tiel watches her and still does not understand why humans have desires. He wonders if humans believe that they are superior to creations like him. A magic beast begins chasing a human and prepares to attack. Suddenly, Suho arrives at the airport and punches the magic beast in the face. He tells everyone to run away. Tiel feels shocked to see a hunter wearing a black mask and recalls how Minsung described a hunter with a black mask who destroyed the Hyena Guild. He quickly realizes that this is the same hunter who disrupted the Stardust manufacturing process. Rest of the goblins continue killing the remaining civilians, while Suho eliminates a group of goblins with a single strike. Suho knows that there is no way the Hunters Association would allow a dungeon break to happen and understands that the situation could lead to many casualties. He decides to focus on evacuating all the people from the airport. Tiel attempts to control Suho using his amplify ability, but fails because Suho has never consumed Stardust. Tiel senses that Suho's magic power is either equal to or slightly higher than Minsung's. Suddenly, Suho uses shadow extraction to raise a few goblin shadows and commands them to help evacuate the civilians. Tiel feels shocked to see a human wielding the powers of darkness and recalls how the Shadow Monarch had the same ability. He begins to suspect that Suho might be connected to the Shadow Monarch and wonders if this is the reason Suho disrupted their Stardust factory. Suho looks back and notices a child nearby, while Tiel decides to hide his presence for now. Suddenly, a large truck is thrown toward Apostle, and he saves the child from the explosion, which is caused by the truck. The dungeon boss appears, and Suho notices Stardust attached to its eye. Baru informs Suho that he senses Itarum energy coming from the magic beast. Suho begins to suspect that the Apostles might be involved with the dungeon boss. Baru suddenly senses a strange presence behind him and turns to see a kid, but dismisses it as his imagination. The dungeon boss tries to punch Suho, but Suho counters with his own punch. The clash of their punches shakes the entire floor. Tiel observed the situation and understands that Suho saved him because he is in the form of a human child. He also realizes that Suho's power is far weaker compared to the Shadow Monarch. Suho delivers a powerful strike to the dungeon boss's face, and Tiel sees this as a perfect opportunity to get rid of Suho. Suddenly, a hunter appears and uses flames to attack the magic beasts. Tiel feels astonished by the sheer number of flame balls and recognizes the hunter as Choi Jong-In. Suho feels stunned by the overwhelming magic power of Choi Jong-In, and the flames instantly kill all the magic beasts. However, the dungeon boss withstood the attack. The dungeon boss tries to attack Suho, but Choi Jong-In creates an arrow made of flames and launches it at the dungeon boss. The arrow cuts through the airport and throws the dungeon boss out of the airport. The civilians thank Choi Jong-In for saving them and call him the human weapon. Choi Jong-In looks around to find Suho, but Suho decides to hide to protect his identity. Choi Jong-In feels confused about why the hunter left without claiming any credit for his efforts. Suho feels disbelief that the apostles targeted civilians and begins to wonder what they are planning. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Tiel, and the third fragment emerges from a small portal. The second fragment begins giving a brief explanation and mentions a variable that needs to be eliminated, but the third fragment interrupts him and states that he will retrieve the rest of the details from his memories. The second fragment hesitates for a moment and feels sadness, knowing that he will disappear as the new personality takes over. Despite this, he resolves to fulfill his duty to his god and merges with the third fragment. The second fragment transforms into a young man and identifies the variable. The second fragment referred to as a being capable of using the same authority as darkness. He feels that the second fragment's decision to eliminate Suho was wrong and decides instead to turn Suho into one of his followers, since Suho possesses the power to control the dead. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Suho, and he gets completely tired after a long lecture from his uncle. Jinho urges him to prioritize his safety and explains that he could never face Suho's parents if something happened to him. Suho feels happy, recalling how his mom and dad would also be worried for him. He decides to head to the Shadow Dungeon, and Baru suggests that he should get some rest. However, Suho insists on completing his daily quest to earn his rewards, and Baru notices that the young monarch has become addicted to growing stronger. Suho enters the Shadow Dungeon and is shocked to find that the daily quest is gone. The system explains that all otherworldly residents in the dungeon have been killed, so the quest has come to an end. Suho wonders how this happened, and Esil informs him that Ammut killed all the goblins in the Shadow Dungeon overnight. Ammut explains that he simply eliminated all the loathsome servants of Tarnak. Suho feels nervous as he realizes he can no longer grow stronger through the daily quest. Ammut offers to train Suho to help him become stronger, and suddenly the system notifies Suho of a new daily quest. Suho accepts the quest and discovers that it requires him to do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run. Suho feels unimpressed by the new quest, and Ammut explains that simply completing the tasks will not be enough. He tells Suho to carry him on his back while performing all the exercises. Both Suho and Esil feel feels shocked by this suggestion, and Ammut realizes that his current size would make it impossible for Suho to carry him. He informs them that he can manipulate his body size and shrinks himself. Suho gets into position to do a push-up and recalls how he could not use Ammut's bond skill because the difference in their fighting abilities is too large. Apparently, Suho needs to reach level 80 to unlock the bond skill with the heir of the Iron Body. Ammut sits on Suho's back, and Suho collapses to the ground, unable to bear the weight. His party members feel worried as Suho struggles, and Suho feels like his arms are about to break. He begins to doubt if he can complete 100 push-ups at this rate, but Ammut tells him that this is the only way to grow stronger. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a field-type dungeon near Paju, where Lee Minsung goes to check on the Stardust Factory. Suddenly, a demon appears behind him, and Lee Minsung asks how much longer he needs to continue this work. The demon responds that he should feel honored to be part of the Stardust manufacturing. It is explained that the demon name is Murmu, and he oversees the Stardust Factory. He explains that they should be grateful to the apostles for saving their filthy lives, and Lee Minsung becomes furious at being called filthy and cuts off the demon's tentacles with a dagger. He demands to know the location of the apostle, but the demon informs him that the apostle is currently busy. Lee Minsung mentions that Lim Taegyu is returning to Korea and reminds the demon to keep apostle's promise to kill Lim Taegyu. The demon questions why Lee refuses to use Stardust and recalls how he met the apostles. He explains that he was driven out of the dimensional crack and was able to spread Stardust throughout the demon realm. This allowed the low-ranking demons to destroy the Laderu clan. The demon tells Lee that he could become powerful enough to defeat an S-rank hunter if he follows the apostles, but Lee still refuses to consume Stardust and starts leaving. The demon thinks to himself that Lee Minsung is foolish for rejecting his advice and believes he will always remain a loser. Lee Minsung decides to endure the pain until the apostle kills Lim Taegyu and plans to report the Stardust manufacturing to the Hunters Association afterward. He wants to restore everything to how it was supposed to be. Meanwhile, Bank Minho follows Lee Minsung's movements under the orders of Chairman Wu and suspects that this location might be where Stardust is being manufactured. Chairman Wu instructs her to keep tracking him, and Choi Jong-In observes that they are getting closer to uncovering Lee Minsung's plans. Choi recalls how the association members have no memories of the airport dungeon break and concludes that Stardust is the root cause. Chairman Wu decides to capture Lee Minsung along with whoever is supporting him, and Choi Jong-In offers his hunters to assist the association. Chairman Wu looks at a picture of himself with Sung Jinwoo and begins to suspect that Suho might also be a growth-type hunter just like his father. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to Suho's training, and he finally completes 100 push-ups. His bones are completely broken from the exercise, and both Gray and Esil feel deeply worried about their young monarch. Beru wants to stop the training, but Suho insists on continuing and purchases healing potions to recover from his injuries. Ammut feels impressed by Suho's determination, and Suho asks him to continue the training so he can become strong enough to face Lee Minsung. Suho continues his daily quest and uses the bond skill with Gray to complete his tasks. He consumes a large number of healing potions to recover from his injuries. Ammut feels surprised that Suho managed to complete the tasks and begins to feel confident that the young monarch might one day surpass Tarnak. Suho finally finishes his daily quest and checks his rewards. He successfully increases his strength to 78 and levels up his endurance as well. He expresses excitement about continuing the daily quest tomorrow, and Ammut agrees with him. Later, Suho returns home and falls asleep the moment he arrives. Beru decides to watch TV and learns that the Hunters Association is planning to take swift action against the Grim Reaper Guild, along with other guilds that control high-ranking field-type dungeons. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Lee Minsung, and an association member explains that they cannot leave field-type dungeons in their current state. The member explains that the B-rank field-type dungeon in the Paju field must be cleared immediately. They request Lee to participate in the raid, since he has not done any hunter work for the past 6 months. Lee suspects that Chairman Wu is behind this and feels disbelief that the association is targeting the largest Stardust factory in the Paju field. He decides to reject the proposition, even if it means making the Hunters Association his enemy. However, Lim Taegyu, the guild master of the Grim Reaper Guild, agrees to the proposition. Lee feels shocked to see his guild master return to Korea so quickly and realizes that Lim Taegyu is intentionally getting in his way. The association member requests Lim Taegyu to form a party with his guild members and assures him that the Hunters Association will dispatch a few hunters to assist them. Lee feels anxious that his secrets might be exposed and laments that the field-type dungeon is extremely valuable. Lim Taegyu knows that the Hunters Association is not attempting to clear the dungeon, but is instead trying to uncover Lee Minsung's secret hidden within the field-type dungeon. He becomes furious that Lee has been using his guild members and boldly confronts him. He asks if Lee still thinks of him as the same driver he once was. Lee begins to tremble nervously, and Lim Taegyu suddenly receives a text. He informs him that a new S-rank hunter has appeared in South Korea and decides to recruit the hunter into their guild. He orders Lee to prepare the contract wages for the new hunter and tells him to clean up his mess. Lee feels disgusted that another S-rank hunter has appeared and wishes for the apostle to kill his guildmaster as soon as possible. Suddenly, he glances at the photo of the new S-rank hunter and starts smirking after realizing that the new hunter is actually an apostle. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Hunters Association, where all the recruiters are shocked after seeing the new S-rank hunter. Tiel uses the alias Park Dojin as a cover, and Choi Jong-In congratulates him on becoming an S-rank hunter. Choi feels like he has seen Tiel before, but Tiel denies it and responds that they have never met. Choi Jong-In expresses interest in signing a contract with him, but Tiel chooses to sign with the Grim Reaper Guild instead. Lim Taegu feels disbelief that the new S-rank hunter has selected his guild. A week later, all the hunters gather at the Paju field-type dungeon. Fake Minho from the White Tiger Guild joins the raid to assist. Lee Minsung begins acting kindly toward her, and Minho feels stunned by how natural he seems. She understands that Lee is completely rotten on the inside, yet he maintains a kind face on the outside. She becomes determined to peel off his mask and expose all of his secrets. However, she feels uneasy as the new S-rank hunter joins their party. Meanwhile, Suho joins the mining team with the goal of uncovering the truth about the apostles from Lee Minsung.